It just came out really organically, naturally. It wasn't like we sat down and had a strategy session about how we want to craft this brand narrative. It honestly, I felt like it just came out of my heart. It was just like my truth it came out from what I said earlier about like, this is wrong, it needs to be fixed, right? I do feel like my background in social justice and Asian American studies really prepared me to craft this narrative because I had the tools and I had the framework to unpack and deconstruct systems of oppression or discrimination.
Hello and welcome to Food and Beverage Therapy Podcast, where we talk about leadership, entrepreneurship, and innovation in the coffee world. Learn from experts, CEOs, and leaders in the coffee industry on how they challenge themselves, continue to grow, innovate, and reinvent the landscape that makes up the business I love, coffee. I'm Jake Leonti, your host. I'm the cafe guru at F&B Therapy, consultant and entrepreneur, and I've worked at every link of the value chain over a 20-year career. I'm joined by my co-host, Andy Trindle-Mersch, another coffee expert with over 20 years in the business and current VP of Coffee Operations and Sustainability at Phil's Coffee, as well as the board member at the Coalition for Racial Equity. Here we are, excited to talk to you again, because I just had, again, a great conversation. I was just talking to Sahra Nguyen of Nguyen Coffee Supply. I don't know if you're familiar with them. They have a cold brew line that's gone national with Whole Foods, and they have some beautiful Vietnamese coffees. Have you had a chance to try them before?
I have not tried them, but I am familiar with the line and I'm familiar with her work. It's really interesting, but no, I haven't yet tasted it. I'm planning to now.
Yeah, you can get it national, so they probably have it at your Whole Foods. So
yeah, I will go try it. Yeah.
I've got a chance. I've tried all three of them. I haven't, and I sampled some of the coffee at the SCA show as well. Okay. I thought it was great. I'll be honest.
Great.
I thought I was going to like the coconut one the best, but I actually like the pure black product. It was really good. I mean, it has that, sort of intrinsic Robusta characteristic to it, but it was very sweet. It was clean, and it was really nice. It was just was a good coffee. So I think what she is doing by reframing the conversation around Robusta and Vietnamese coffee is pretty amazing, and that's a lot of what we talk about, because I can't believe the storm that's been created.
Right. Indeed. Yeah. So out of curiosity, so you said it has the Robusta-like character. I know what I think that character is. What do you think of that character?
Kind of like, there's like it is difficult to describe in some ways, but it's like, a kind of an earthiness to it. And like, I know I'm going to use the wrong adjectives.
Yeah. Well, the one I would use is not one that I think is very good. So I hesitate to use it, especially when I know we're talking about a product that, probably needs to be propped up out there, given the coffee supply and the long-term needs that we have as an industry. But I think of rubbery a lot, like kind of a rubbery, earthy.
You can get a rubbery kind of, I think that is definitely like a more of a bad characteristic of Robusta when you get that rubbery, or if it's too animal-like. But this, I would say, is more, it's earthy, but maybe the words like umami, more like a savory quality that maybe you might get from like a mushroom or something like that. So it's different. It's different than like kind of the pure sort of sweet and fruit that you get from Arabica, and it's more savory, earthy, but then it also has the chocolate sweetness to it. So it's just like a different style, and it's totally a different way of kind of calibrating your taste buds to a coffee.
Yeah. And that's probably part of it, right? It's going to be for her, probably hopefully teaching people to just find it as a different product. You're not trying to compare it directly to Arabica coffee and what we look for in that, but this is a different and other product. Is that like how she's thinking about it, or is she trying to compare, go head to toe with, or toe to toe with Arabica coffee?
No, I think that's kind of what's brilliant about the whole strategy is rather than just trying to compare them and kind of combat with them, the idea is to just expand your understanding of flavor and think about it more like cuisine, and like if everything tasted like Italian food, I mean, it would be wonderful, but
that's not super,
but it would be limited.
I see where you're going though. It's good to branch out.
Yeah. So then you have your Italian food, but then you can also have, your French food and every other
and Thai food and all sorts of awesome things.
Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of the idea, is that it's just it's its own category of flavor. And so they're sort of celebrating that, which I think is great. And they're doing high quality products, so they're doing the nice processing. They're getting more into even anaerobic processing and kind of experimenting and elevating the level that they're producing. So
I hadn't even thought about that, because certainly I've been looking at that in Arabica and thinking about that. And I know you have for sure, but I hadn't thought about you could do the same thing in Robusta and see how that might improve or change the flavor profiles. But then you're still using the Robusta bean, which is a hardier stock and, greater yields and
Exactly. Yeah. So it has all those kind of attributes to it, but then they've just been doing so much upgrading in terms of the processing in Vietnam. And, she was kind of opening my eyes to the coffee culture there in general. So there's a large cafe going culture, and the farmers are super motivated. And, so it's, as it says on their website, it's a revolution.
Yeah, I definitely need to go out and try it. So I've been like one of those coffee people who has historically just had Robusta enough times to know I don't like it. But I think, as I even commented on a different episode, or if not, never say never, right? Like I have continually, the older I get, things that I thought I would never do or I would never like, would never happen, like getting a puppy, for example, which just happened. All of a sudden they happen and you can be surprised. So I admire her for going out there and tackling the market. I don't personally right now see a way for Phil's to do that with the blends and the product lines we have. But I think it's great that we have a lot of people who want to drink coffee and we don't have enough Arabica. So I think finding a way to make Robusta better and enjoyable for people is a good idea.
Absolutely. And like you said, I think, or like we've been discussing, I think it's just another way of expanding what we can offer. And, because you could have cafes that are doing purely Robusta, or you can have different menu items, that are focused around that and having more of a savory coffee experience. So I think there's just a lot. It just creates another level of creativity you can have. And, me always, I've been working a lot in Italian coffee over the years. And so for me, knowing Robusta has always been kind of an important part of that puzzle as well.
That's right. Yeah. Whereas I've never had that. Right. So, but I've tasted Robusta in some nice tastings over the years, but it's not ever been a part of the product that I buy or sell. So I'm really not that familiar.
You're not yet in love.
I know, right? Not yet in love. Purist.
That's okay. But you're keeping yourself open. That's all.
I am open. Yes.
I think if you listen to Sahra and, give it a try at the Whole Foods, I think that you'll be pleasantly surprised.
I'm definitely going to. And I am actually super surprised that you like the black best. Like that's
I was honestly surprised too, because they have the coconut milk one. Then they have one that is the Vietnamese coffee with the sweetened condensed milk.
Very sweet. Yeah.
And then there's the black product. And I was like, not expecting that to be my favorite. and it was really good. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, I'm going to make an effort to go out and try it so I can open my mind. Yeah.
All right. I'm interested to hear what you think.
Okay. Will do.
Hello and welcome to Food and Beverage Therapy Podcast. I'm here with my special guest today, Sahra Nguyen, CEO and founder of Nguyen Coffee Supply. How you doing, Sahra? Welcome.
Oh, hi, Jake. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming aboard. I really wanted to connect with you on this interview because I heard you originally on the Fifth Wave podcast, and you were so intelligent and passionate, and that you made me really curious about Nguyen Coffee Supply. And then we met at SCA in Portland, and so I'm really excited to have this opportunity to speak with you.
Yeah, likewise. I love all your posts on LinkedIn. I love the content you've been putting out. Love your newsletter. Excited.
So I like to start everything off with like the really heavy hitter questions. For instance, what is your morning coffee routine?
Oh gosh. Morning coffee routine is I have a La Marzocco Linea mini at home. I do drink my own coffee, and I rotate through all the blends. So it's a double shot of espresso, and I fluctuate between like a latte with whole milk and like 7 grams of sweetened condensed milk, or the iced version of that, but shaken. But yeah, it's espresso. It's our loyalty blend, which is Arabica and Robusta, whole milk, and a squeeze of condensed milk, just 7 grams, not too sweet.
It's pretty serious and very specific. I like it. That sounds delicious.
Yeah.
I don't go as far as that. I mean, you have a nice home setup, so you're really taking care of yourself.
It's a game changer. It's so worth it. Anyone who's thinking about like making the switch to like any type of home espresso machine, whether it's a Breville or a La Marzocco, I'm like, it increases your daily joy by like 200%, and you save money over time. So I'm like, if you drink coffee every day, I'd say go for it, because that daily joy is just like magnified. It's the best feeling.
It is absolutely true. I agree.
Yeah.
I'm used to like being spoiled and having access to such great coffees all the time, and then having to do it for work. So I was always like, don't have to think about it too much at home because I'm always gonna get that treat later on.
Yeah.
But since the pandemic, I doubled down on the home setup. So
yeah, what's your home setup currently?
I have the Breville double boiler espresso machine, and that's pretty sweet. I also have a Pavoni lever machine.
Nice.
Because I like the lever action. I like the extraction you get from that espresso machine.
Yeah.
And it makes everything like really smooth. And it's the same reason I listen to records and stuff like that. I like vintage, I like old things. So
Love that.
yeah, it plays into that. So one of the interesting stories that you talked about on that podcast was that there were no importers for you to work with to get specialty Robusta or Arabica Vietnamese coffee.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. How did the search begin, and then how did you take hold of it yourself?
Yeah, well, so, around 2016, I started noticing Vietnamese iced coffee was becoming really trendy, but a lot of cafes weren't using real Vietnamese coffee beans, because I would ask them and they'd say it's their house, Ethiopian or Colombian, whatever, and they'd ask me to condensed milk. So that sent me on the journey of like, okay, well, I want to try to offer real Vietnamese coffee beans to folks in New York, and I want to offer a fresh roasted, small batch roasted Vietnamese coffee bean. And, I didn't set out to become an importer. So the first step was like, let me find a roasting facility. So in New York, we're really lucky. There are so many shared roasting facilities that really enable new roasters to learn and small business to get up and running. And then the next step was like, okay, well, I need to buy some green beans. And so I would look at some of these major importers like Cafe Imports or Olam. But yeah, on their websites, none of them had Vietnamese coffee beans on their websites or in the catalog, which I thought was very interesting. And so from there, I realized like this missed opportunity for not just myself, but pretty much any roaster who is buying from these larger green bean importers. So that's when I realized that, wow, this product really isn't available in the United States, right? Like it probably is through maybe like instant coffee or like another supermarket ground coffee option, but not in the way that we were engaging with other like specialty coffees in the industry. And so that set me on my journey of going to Vietnam and then starting back at the source.
Very cool. And you're in new territory when you have to build the road, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So did you find that, I mean, like, because some people starting out a coffee company is enough, like that's a work in itself. So having to create those inroads and be able to set up your own supply chain, that's a daunting task. When you went to Vietnam and you started searching for farmers, did you have to like kind of implement any quality changes, or did you just find farms that were already doing stuff that you liked, or how did that step work?
Yeah, no, the inroads were interesting. And I'd say that I feel like I had a really nice advantage because most of my family is still in Vietnam. My parents are from Vietnam, and they both have large families. They're like one of 7 to 8 siblings, and they're the only ones who left the country after the war ended. So I grew up with a really small family experience here in Boston, where I was born and raised. And so I grew up going back often. And so now it's like 80% of my family is in Vietnam, like all my aunts, uncles, and then all my cousins, and now all of my second cousins under them, right? So immediately I was very supported. And also a very unique thing about my family is like I have relatives in the north, in the capital, Hanoi. That's where my dad is from. And then I have relatives in the south, where my mom's side is from. So we have a pretty extensive network combined across both of our families. And so immediately when I started asking my relatives about connecting with coffee farmers, like they all knew someone, right? And so at the time though, I was in Hanoi. And so me and my aunt and my uncle, we took a plane down to the lot, which is where we started importing from. Started there, met a couple of farmers, visited a couple of farms, and they would introduce us to other farmers. And from there, I learned a lot about what they were already doing. And to your question of like, were there certain quality things that we had to implement? Actually, the farmer that I ended up working with was already doing the things that we wanted, right? Like he actually, in Vietnam, he actually won an award with the government of Vietnam as being like one of the top farmers with organic practices, right? But it's not USDA certified, it's not recognized by the US, but like that's always been his passion, right? So I got really lucky that one, I had connections, but more so I met someone so early on who was very passionate about producing clean coffee. And as we were talking during that time, there's this thing in Vietnam at the time that was this phrase, it's called cà phê sạch, which means clean coffee. Because in Vietnam, domestically, they are aware of the history of coffee. They're aware of the fillers that may have been used in street coffee and all these things. And just like so many parts of the world with the internet, now they're like, oh, like I want to do cà phê Nguyen chất, which means pure coffee with no fillers. So they themselves in Vietnam, they're going through their own like evolution of advancing coffee production. Not everyone is caught up, but there is a movement there. And one more story I share, which is like indicative of like where they're at in their journey. When I was there, oftentimes folks would say things like, oh, you have to go to this coffee shop down the street because they have what they say, cà phê xay tươi, which means fresh ground coffee. Like it was like a mind-blowing concept. And they're like, oh, cà phê xay tươi, like fresh ground coffee. They're like, you can see them grinding in front of you. Like I was like, oh, this is so cool. Like this is their journey right now. You know, they're going through their own new wave coffee journey because before that, there wasn't the concept of fresh ground coffee, right? So yeah, a lot of the work was already happening and it was really cool to be like, wow, this is already happening. But yet, because the rest of the world was still entrapping Vietnam's perception of like third world, post-war, instant cheap, there was like a missed opportunity to connect with the actual reality situation. And of course, I have to say, there's still so much work to be done, but the work is being done.
That's amazing. I think it's a story that you hear a lot in coffee producing countries, you know, like, and I've worked on a number of jobs where you go down and the objective is to like kind of help bring the coffee up to a specialty level or whatever. Mm-hmm. And you often see that a lot of the coffee consumed in those countries is not the highest quality. You know, they export that. That's what they're selling. Mm-hmm. So I relate to that. I see the idea of like, yes, a fresh ground coffee. That's like really exciting. Yeah. You know, and there's certain countries that have it a little bit more than others, but most of the time it's hard to get a good coffee unless you're like in the major city, you know, like if you're in Guatemala City, there's a couple of good cafes, but if you're outside of there, it's really difficult. Yeah. And one of the challenges I always found with getting coffee to specialty is really equipment based. You know, it ends up being that like they could be growing things fine, processing fine, but then it's that extra step of sorting and, you know, the access to sorting equipment and that kind of idea that sort of is holding people back a little bit. Did you find anything like that as well? Yeah. No,
absolutely. And so, you know, I would go back often, pretty much every year, twice a year, except for the COVID years. And then we'd meet with more farms and co-ops and have these deeper conversations around after you harvest, of course. So there's this like education around hand picking when it's ripe, only when it's ripe and red. And then, yes, the processing methods. And there are certain mills that have better machinery. And this was kind of like the cycle that was hard for a lot of farmers to break out of. They were like, well, I would love to produce a better coffee product. But what a lot of farmers were seeing was that they would overinvest in producing a better product, but at the end of the season, they didn't have a buyer that believed in the value of their product. So they would end up selling it to the commodity market or to whichever greenhouse or green importer exporter who would buy it. And so they would actually end the season at a loss. Right. So there's a disconnect between what a lot of producers in Vietnam wanted to do. One, because they wanted to elevate their livelihoods, but two, because they're very passionate about coffee. Right? They're passionate. It's like their craft and they want to produce a better crop. But if there's no buyer at the end of the season committing to them, it's very hard for them to make that commitment, that move, And so since we've come in, I've definitely seen our relationships with some of our producers grow. They've been able to advance a lot of their methods. They've been able to invest in more machinery. They've been able to, even everything from like getting like a color sorter now, yeah, which is like pretty cool. And now they've actually been able to expand the land as well and investing in like new varietals. And like now we have these conversations where they're like, what kind of processing method do you want at the end of the season? If you tell me now, we can do that. Do you want a honey process method? Do you want red, yellow, black? Do you want us to do like anaerobic fermentation? And because they want the opportunity to experiment themselves. And so before when we first started, it was like, just Arabica, just Robusta, just full wash, just natural. Like, let me warm up the audiences. And now they're like, can we do more? Can we do more? And I'm always like, I think we're ready. Like, let's do more. But yeah, so now the conversation has evolved a lot, not just from like the processing method, the harvesting method, but also like the processing innovations.
I think that's great. The enthusiasm is exciting. And I even remember a couple of years ago, I had an exporter from Vietnam reach out to me and send me some samples of some honeyed coffees. And I was like, okay, this is getting interesting.
Yeah.
One of the things though, that really interested me about kind of the conversation you've been leading is that we're prizing the flavor of Vietnam, and that the kind of intrinsic terroir and the way that the beans are grown there, and that it's kind of likening it to a culinary experience, where it's like, we like food from different places. We like different flavors from different things. And this is kind of expanding that Rubicon of flavor. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I don't know. And I guess I'm just looking to get a comment from you on it is it more important to keep focusing on that message or, because when you get in the alternate processing, then it becomes more about the processing flavor and less about the terroir and that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think like for some folks, when we can focus on the processing methods, I think it just inspires a level of experimentation, creativity. But I do think at its core, focusing on the unique origin, terroir, flavor experiences of this bean and this origin is important because that's how we look at coffees from all around the world. It's how we look at wines, right? Wine is very like this framework. I think the world of wine has such a beautiful framework of like, you focus on the varietals, you focus on the origin, and you focus on the terroir. And it's like, if we just apply that same framework to coffee, imagine like how much more expansive the coffee world would be, right? And it's less of trying to match or pair a certain coffee bean or species from an origin to another place, but it's like, let's just expand and let people discover for themselves what they like, right? So yeah, I think it's both. I think it depends on like who we're trying to reach, right? I think for certain people who are a little more skeptical, if we lean into the processing method, they're like, okay, like I can see this more immediately, right? But then I think to go deeper, it's really going back to the origin, what's unique about that specific origin.
I think that's the most interesting part of the conversation right now is expanding people's palates and their preferences. But it's also, I think, having those alternate processing methods available sends kind of an intellectual message to people that, Vietnam is doing innovative things and that you're able to take processing to the next level. So I think that's really cool as well.
Can I add to that too, Jake?
Yeah.
It's also helping to think about like the future of coffee, the viability of coffee, and the possibilities, right? Let's say somebody truly just loves a really fruit-forward coffee experience, right? If there's more than one way to achieve that experience, we should explore that, right? Versus just hyper-focusing on, only this one variety or species of variety from this one origin can offer a very blueberry experience. If we can diversify our options, it just helps to create more sustainability for growing communities of like, how can I achieve this for what the consumer is expecting, And then on that note, I think one of the best compliments I got at SCA Expo in Portland this past year, we saw each other. I had shared our competition bean, the anaerobic Robusta, with someone at one of the booths, the Pour Steady booths, and he's not a coffee connoisseur at all. And he came back to me, he said, I don't like this coffee at all. It's too fruity for me.
You out-fruited him. Amazing.
I was like, oh my gosh, I don't think those words have ever been strung together about a Robusta. I was like, I love that you said that. That is amazing. This is where it's like, wow, mind shattering and just like expanding perspectives.
Absolutely. No, that is amazing. And kind of getting back to creating the inroads in your first importing experience, how large was that first order? I mean, how much coffee were you able to bring in? You know, how big of a risk were you undertaking?
Oh gosh, that first order was 1 pallet.
Okay.
It was like, I think 6 or 8 bags. It was tiny. And the pallet was so funny because at that time, my producer had never exported coffee beans to the US directly. He's only sold to like these greenhouses, right? And the pallet arrived at the shea roasting facility where I was roasting out of, and it had like, it was like a cage, Jake. He had like put wooden planks on all 4, 5, 6 sides. So if this one arrived, it was kind of like this, such a spectacle. And everyone in the warehouse, like, we've never seen a pallet caged up like this. It was really cute. So that was our very first pallet. Mm-hmm.
Amazing. It was well protected. Yeah. Precious goods coming in.
Yeah.
What was the beginning of how you started to sell? Were you starting to sell online, direct to consumer, or were you going for wholesale customers?
It was 100% online, D2C, because for us at that journey, I felt like in order to shift perspectives, we have to go to the end consumer, right? In order to shift the narrative, shift perspectives, which would then eventually shift systems, we had to go to the end consumer. And I felt like having a relationship with customers through e-commerce, through D2C was the best way to help evangelize and help spread our message. Whereas the B2B path, one, it's less of a opportunity to connect directly, but also at that time, this was like late 2018, 2019, in the B2B world, folks weren't really receptive to what I was trying to offer because they have their own fixed perspectives in the industry, being a business in the industry, whereas consumers are actually really flexible. A lot of the narratives that we talk about in the industry, consumers are completely unaware of, right? They're like, I didn't know that was the case. Like, I just like what I like. And so we would D2C for the first couple of years.
Nguyen Coffee Supply is on a charge like I've never seen before, and you have so much momentum behind the brand, and it appears to be this perfect confluence of the right product at the right time and the right people leading, and it's been really amazing to watch. Did you have any idea that the company was going to catch fire like this?
Did I have any idea? Maybe like not for the first year. I didn't necessarily have the idea, but I had so much conviction that there was an injustice that needed to be made right? I just had so much conviction that this is a product that people would enjoy, because we know that Vietnam is the second largest coffee producer in the world. So I'm like, people know this flavor profile. They just don't really necessarily know where it's from. I had such a conviction that Vietnam should be included in the larger conversation around like especially coffee and like community economics, community advancement. And more broadly, I had such conviction that like we needed to expand our framework in coffee in general to be more inclusive and expansive of all experiences from the origin to the cup, right? So that was like my charge. I didn't quite know where it was going the first couple of years because it was totally bootstrapped. I was like working out of my apartment. I was just like motivated by this fire. Once I got really serious about the business, meaning I stopped working my freelance gigs, I committed full time, I raised my first round of capital. From there, my mindset was really fixed on the business. And then after a couple of months from there, I would say, yes, I knew we would get here.
Very cool. Very cool. And you have a unique background, like you said, doing kind of freelance work. You have a background in Asian studies and media and writing and leadership, which kind of makes you the perfect person for this mission in this moment. So take me back a little bit of what made you want to get into media in the first place, and then how that kind of translated into where you are now.
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I was in high school, I discovered social justice and activism at a young age. I was very fortunate to be involved in several youth activist social justice groups, which at that time really sparked my lifelong passion for helping to make the world a better place. My lifelong passion of helping underrepresented, marginalized folks feel seen, feel valued, right? And then that led me to my journey in undergrad, where I majored in Asian American studies, like political science, like social studies, right? And even like throughout my undergrad career and like my early professional career, I was always working community organizing or working with youth arts organizations, right? And then eventually I spent a good chunk of my career in New York as a freelance documentary filmmaker, writer, journalist. I was using the channel of media and storytelling to help increase representation for communities I felt like were not as visible in mainstream. Because I believe that if we could kind of tell these stories, we could build empathy across communities, right? More folks who see themselves on screen, but also non-Asian American folks or non-marginalized folks who weren't on screen could then begin to empathize better, right? That was my medium at the time for channeling my passion for social justice. It was media. And then similarly, like the thread is quite the same with Nguyen Coffee Supply. I saw that Vietnamese coffee and more broadly, the Robusta species was invisible in the coffee space. I saw that Robusta grown communities all around the world didn't have an opportunity to advance. They were marginalized into a very specific segment of the industry that was lower, cheaper. I saw that even on a consumer perspective, like folks of color, folks of all communities weren't really represented in the coffee community when it came to marketing or storytelling. And so I basically chose like a really, really difficult industry to channel my passion for justice. And so all of that has really served me well as I've been building the brand, but really sharing the narrative and helping folks to reframe and shift the narrative. Because at the end of the day, like that is the true impact here, right? If we can really, as an industry, as a global community, like reframe, expand, it just would have a global ripple effect all around the world, you know? So yeah, that's definitely how the common thread through it all.
Makes total sense.
Totally unplanned though. Didn't see it coming. Never saw myself as an importer or even a roaster or even working in coffee. It just kind of happened this way.
You have the true entrepreneurial spirit, and coffee is kind of uniquely like a perfect platform for something like this because it is such a global product and it's attached to so much culture and history. And so there's so many different ways that it connects to people, and it connects to everybody in some way. And so another thing I think is interesting that you were able to do is kind of create this emotional need to try this coffee, which is kind of rare, that's one of the things they teach you in sales, right? Is like, if you can create emotional need, then, you can make the sale. But it's so hard to normally do that with just a product. And you guys, you've been able to craft this emotional need and get people to be compelled to try it and support it on a different level. Even your website, when you look it up on Google, it says, join the Vietnamese coffee revolution, which is like, okay, that's really impactful stuff. So how did that kind of messaging evolve? And we heard a little bit about the inspiration, but how did you go about crafting that?
It just came out really organically, naturally. It wasn't like we sat down and had a strategy session about how we want to craft this brand narrative. Honestly, I felt like it just came out of my heart. It was just like my truth. And if anything, as the company's grown and evolved, I've had to find other ways to set a foundation for our marketing team. Because if it's not I can't just be the only one speaking this message, right? How did it evolve? There was no crazy strategy session behind it. It just literally came out from what I said earlier about like, this is wrong, it needs to be fixed, right? I do feel like my background in social justice and Asian American studies really prepared me to craft this narrative because I had the tools and I had the framework to unpack and deconstruct systems of oppression or to deconstruct discrimination, right? And I had the tools, whether it's from my community organizing days, to find ways to connect, compel people towards a shared mission. So a lot of it was natural. And then I think over time, I really took note of what resonated with our community, right? We've always stayed close to our community. Our community has gone us so far, especially because, we were bootstrapped for so long. We've always listened to our community, whether it's through organic messages on social media or through customer surveys. Like, we always want to know what resonates with them. And then I think every time we hear like feedback, oh, that resonated, let's lean more into that, because it's not just about what I want to say or what I believe, right? It's about finding that common thread to connect with more and more people as our audiences grow. So a little bit of like, it started from me and like just here, then as we expanded, it's more about listening to the community and seeing what resonates and finding that common thread.
The authenticity comes through really clearly. And I think that's part of the success of the brand, is that it is coming from a pure place. And it's I don't know, it got me super interested in it as well. And because even the branding doesn't necessarily, like the actual visuals of it doesn't necessarily speak to the same thing, but it's really the words and the passion that are coming through. And I think that's great. So do you create your own social media, with your media background, or were you working with a company from the beginning?
Oh no, we've never outsourced our branding or social media or marketing. We've never outsourced any of that. Wow. All the designs from the early days, either I designed because I'm fluent in. I'm also a creative person. I'm fluent in the whole Adobe suite. So everything in the early days I had designed. Over time. Like my sister helped me like improve the coffee bags, right? Family, all of like the early social media content, the videos, the photos, like we did it all in house because one, I came from a documentary film background. So I could film everything, had all the equipment, all the photography. My partner at the time, now husband, who, we've been dating since 2016, he has an art background as well. He went to school for video game design. So he's also fluent in the whole Adobe suite. And so between the two of us, we created all the content ourselves. Even to this day, yeah, we've never worked with a branding agency. All of our packaging has kind of really been conceptualized in-house. Our cans recently, I did bring on like a friend who's a packaging designer and we would collaborate together. But I think because I already had a very strong creative background and creative vision, that just kind of happened really organically. And today, the content today is on our social media is pretty much, it's just like, I'll make a reel real quick and I'll post it. If it's like a creative asset, motion graphics, it's either like Eric's, my partner, who is now our full-time designer. And then once in a while, we'll outsource some like extra creative needs, but we've always owned the branding in-house. All of our merch is designed in-house, Yeah.
Very impressive.
Keep that close.
Because it has a great look. It goes to the authenticity of the brand as well. The fact that you're creating all the content, but even the graphics and the visuals on the website, really impressive. Yeah. So.
Oh, thank you. Oh, actually, the website we actually relaunched recently, just about a month ago. For the website, we did work with this awesome design agency, Wilson, who I'll call out. But prior to that, I made all of our websites from 2018 to 2023 just through a Shopify template. But yes, we finally upgraded to like a very professional website, and that we did get agency help. But the branding, the foundations are pretty much there. Yeah.
You had mentioned you were from Boston, so I got to get into it a little bit because I'm a Northeasterner. I went to school in Boston as well.
Yay!
What neighborhood around were you from?
My first neighborhood was Rosendale. Okay. And then we moved when I was like a little bit older. We moved to Hyde Park, so it was always like the Orange Line, Forest Hill stop. Like nice. Bus was mine, BPS the whole way, and I went to the first and oldest public school in the nation. Boston Latin School. All right. OG. Yeah. Are you familiar with BLS, BLA, O'Brien, the 3 exam schools? No, I went to high school and stuff in Portland, Maine. Okay. So we didn't pay attention to the high schools, but I know more of the college level stuff. Yeah. So Boston Latin School, it was literally the first public school in the country. Then Harvard was made 1 year later. Wow. But yeah, so I always was like, oh yeah, my high school alum was like Benjamin Franklin. Electricity. Wait, that was Thomas Edison. Sorry. Benjamin Franklin were the glasses. He kind of did some electricity work with the kite and the key, kite, right? Yeah. Right? I thought so. Yeah. I thought that was right. I think Thomas Edison was our alum as well. Nice. Got some good roots there. And then they'll put your plaque up next to them, I guess. Oh. Getting back to the Robusta conversation. I always thought that it was odd that Robusta had a reputation as being like the mass market coffee of choice for larger commercial brands. And yet it was not even the majority of coffee cultivated. Arabica is the majority, and it always has been. But it's kind of been part of that perception issue, I think, with Robusta. And I think that goes back to a lot of different things. It goes back to how it's cultivated, where it's cultivated. And then, I've always actually worked with Robusta from the beginning, because being Italian American, I've always been interested in Italian coffee, and it's been kind of an essential ingredient. The further down the boot, the more percentage of Robusta you're going to have.
And so for me, being interested in that part of coffee, even though I probably started more in specialty, that's what I investigated. And so I had to become fluent in that, because I wanted to be able to create great Italian blends. So for me, that's been a big part of my kind of coffee knowledge and coffee journey. And so recently I've also been getting hit up by some people in Australia and Vietnam that want to talk about Robusta. And because I wrote like a pro Robusta article a while ago as well. And so they're like, yeah, will you try our coffee? I'm like, of course. Yeah. So it's spiraling. It's spiraling.
Yeah. When I was at SCA in Portland, I had so many folks come up to me, Jake, who were like, where can I find some fine Robusta? I'm like, oh my gosh, well, you should do a sourcing trip. You should go to the Origin, talk to folks at Origin, because then now folks at Origin will be like, oh my gosh, we can now produce fine Robusta. Like, what do you need? What are the standards? How do you want it? Right. I like, it's spiraling and it's so exciting.
With the name of your company, Coffee Supply, it could easily expand into a green brand.
Yes.
And you've already laid the groundwork. So I don't know, is there any thoughts on being an importer as well for the specific origin?
We get asked that all the time. And, I will say that we're always open to whatever best serves the industry and whatever best serves our mission. No immediate plans. However, who knows? Honestly, I often feel conflicted because people do ask all the time. And it's not that I don't want to. It's more of like, where's my focus? Like, is this really the right time to get into the green bean business? It's like, for me as an entrepreneur, it's just about really staying focused and making sure that we do that thing really well. And just because there's an opportunity that presents itself that seems viable, it doesn't necessarily mean it's the right time to engage in that, right? I would love to, because we import containers of beans now, and I would love to just send over a couple bags to whoever. But then it's like, are we really ready to open another business? I don't know, maybe not, but we shall see.
Smart. Could be a distraction.
It could be a distraction. I don't know. We'll see.
But I did think at Portland, in my recollection, and maybe it was because I wasn't really looking, but I don't remember seeing any Robusta booths at the SCA show like previous. And then this year there was 2 or 3. And I was just like, whoa, okay, this is the impact. The impact is happening. Yeah. And I'm sure it'll grow even more next year.
Oh my gosh, it's so cool. It's so cool, Jake. And you've been in coffee for so long. Like, would you say that this is a very exciting time, right?
It is an exciting time because there's been moments where it's like threatened to be something, where like, so people started getting a little bit interested in it, and people get nervous about climate change and having resilience and this kind of stuff. And so they're like, oh, maybe we'll start to embrace Robusta. Yeah. And that's when the first crack started to happen, where like the hardcore specialty people.
I see what you did there. First crack.
There you go. It's unavoidable. And so the hardcore specialty people was the first time they started to say, well, maybe we could try Robusta. And then the R certification happened, which is like the Q certification for Robusta. But then it still never took off. And there's still a lot of naysayers. What I think is unique, again, is that you're not using the climate change argument. You're not using the like fear argument of like, well, you kind of have to do this because we're running out of something. Instead, it's more about embracing something different and new, which is like, again, a culinary experience, different flavor profile. I had a similar conversation with my brother. My brother's a chef. And I was creating a blend for him. And again, he's very much into Italian food. And so we wanted to make something that was like specifically Italian blend. And I went all Arabica to begin with, because I was like, well, the setting, you're going to want this. And he actually corrected me. He's like, no, it's not. I don't remember the words he used, but he's like, it's not wild enough. I'm not getting that earthy, like that other layer to it. And I was like, I'm like, well, I think your guests might want something cleaner. He's like, no. He's like, because this is a very authentic Italian restaurant, and we're taking things seriously. Like, they're doing the full testa, they're doing intestines, like they're doing things for adventurous diners. And so he's like, they want adventurous, authentic coffee. And so that kind of reframed it for me in my head. And I was like, you're right. It's just something different. It's something for a different palate and to be enjoyed a different way.
Yes, exactly. It's like, when you're picking a wine, right? It's like, what time of day is it? Am I at a spa? Am I at a dinner? What am I ordering? Am I ordering seafood? Am I ordering steak? Am I ordering chicken? Like, coffee could be the same way, right? But to your comment about like my messaging, I would say that going back to my comment earlier about finding ways to connect with your audience. So we do lean into the messaging around sustainability, climate change when it's appropriate, right? Mm-hmm. But for the most part, if it's consumer facing for our customers, we focus on what's important to them, which is flavor, right? Expansion, discovery, experimentation, trying new things, right? And we bring in the storytelling, we bring in the culture, bring in the mission. And then if their audience, whether they're a consumer or maybe they're a retail buyer, and they really care about sustainability, then we lean into the resilience of the crop. We lean into how folks have seen several seasons of crop failure or volatility with other species. So they're diversifying, so we do lean into all of it, but it's really about the right time and the right audience.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Mm-hmm. And it is, what is a motivator for a lot of people. But I love that it's not like the linchpin of the argument. It's like, it's really about, this is a different flavor. It's different level of experience. Yeah. And I witnessed it firsthand. I've tried all of your cold brews, and I'll be honest, like I didn't know what to expect, because I was like, okay, I haven't actually had this as a cold brew before. I created a cold brew for Cafe Nero, which is a large.
Yes, I love Cafe Nero.
Okay, cool. Yeah, Boston. Come on. Yeah. So I created their cold brew for them, and we use their espresso blend, which has a percentage of Robusta in it, and delicious. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't sure. I was like, is it going to be kind of like this, or what's it going to be like? And I started with the coconut one because I thought that's an entry level drink, and I love coconut. But honestly, I like the black, like the pure black product was the best one. Like that was like natural sweetness. It was super smooth.
It was amazing. Really
yeah.
Wow. Yes. I'm so happy to hear that, Jake, because for us, the reason why we leaned really hard with 100% Robusta is because we wanted to help pair this narrative shift with the experience, right? Of helping people to reimagine what they believe Robusta can be, whether or not for them. Because we could have we did experiment with different blends, right? We experimented with blends of adding some Arabica in there to maybe soften it or make it more palatable or approachable. But we were like, no, we're going to go all in to help people reimagine the experience of Robusta. So I'm so glad to hear feedback. That's big coming from you. Thank you.
No, it's absolutely true. Like, cause I went through all three of them, and I was like, wow, okay, this is surprisingly wonderful. And I was really enjoyed it a lot. And I also think it's brilliant that you went all the way with it, and not to try to soften it. And again, I think that's part of the success, is that it's like, sticking to your guns and kind of just 100% owning it all the way.
Yeah. I have a question about the cold brew that you created for Nero. Is that shelf stable?
No.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah.
We did it fresh, and we started in London first, because that's where they wanted to test it out, because they have the most cafes there. Mm-hmm. And when I started, this was back in like 2016 as well. There was like no cold brew in that market, because again, UK is very much like Europe, where it's like a espresso based kind of drinking culture, and so there was no place to create cold brew either. So we ended up working with a winemaker and using their facility, because I'm like, well, you got all the same equipment, so we can make it work. So we had to teach them how to make cold brew and go through that process. But yeah, so it was not shelf stable. We didn't want to use a heat as a killer as well. So we found HPP process, and we went that way. So that way we could just have more of a fresh product.
Yeah, I think it totally makes sense when a company has distribution. Like I know Blue Bottle's cold brew is some of their products are not shelf stable, or they weren't in the beginning because they had distribution, right? Like Nero. Yeah. And so for us, starting out, building distribution, we absolutely needed a shelf stable product. And I think even with like considering like the process that a coffee goes through, like just getting really beat up through that heat process, I don't have the scientific facts to back this up, but I do believe just like the makeup of a Robusta bean with its sugars, fats, acid, being so completely different, opposite spectrum of Arabica, I felt like it holds up better in the retort process. Whereas a lot of like the RT cold brews that I was tasting on the market that were made with Arabica, I felt like, especially they were cold brew, so they had gone through that process. I felt like they really skewed acidic and sour in a way that like it wasn't palatable for me. But I found it to be a very common flavor profile. And so, yeah, that retort process. So just considering how intense that is, I felt like Robusta held up really well through that.
Yeah, no, it was impressive. And I would agree actually that it does hold up better, because what ends up happening if you're going for more of that nuanced acidic flavor, that's what kind of gets crushed by the heat. But the Robusta, as long as you have that sweetness and you're going for those base notes, it tends to do better with that temperature. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I agree. I think it's shelf stable, especially when you're starting out and you got to carry inventory and things like that. Then it's the right move. We had, like you said, instantly plugged into 600 cafes, so it's like, cool, we can do this. We can go awesome. Fresh all day long.
London was the first place I tried Cafe Nero. I was visiting my sister who was studying abroad at the time, and I remember I loved their mushroom risotto at Cafe Nero. Yes, we had it for dinner like 3 times. So very fond memories there.
They do such a good job. And then, so Boston though was the first market in the US that we came into, and so I was kind of part of that. Yeah.
Only a couple years ago.
That was, I think we started in 2013, 2014. 2014 maybe was the first cafe. And then now there's over 40 there now. So it's they've made good work of it. And I always thought Boston was a brilliant choice too, because it's kind of a little bit more open to brands coming in and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So what's it like to see your coffees in like every Whole Foods that you go into now?
I need to do a tour. I need to do a cross-country road trip to see in every Whole Foods. It's surreal, Jake. I feel like just building this company, things move pretty fast. And I don't even know if I've fully had time to process everything. So I have to really, really try to like sit with my feelings. I don't even have the words. It's really cool. It's wild. It's so insane to me. Especially for my parents. Recently, we launched in Whole Foods in Boston, where my parents still live, and I got to go to Whole Foods with them together. And that was just like the best, like just beaming with joy and pride. It's really special for me personally, for my family, but more broadly, I think it's just like a very exciting signal for our world, for our communities, for our society of like, just having a more culturally inclusive experience on shelf for all people, and this widens the path for other brands who maybe are building from their culture, or other brands who are building just to diversify the options of flavors on shelf, whoever that is, I think that's the coolest part. Like, wow, we're really living, building during a time where there's just so much more expansion happening, which helps more communities feel seen, but also it's also great for consumers because it gives consumers more options, right? More variety. So it's very exciting.
It's amazing that, Whole Foods notoriously can't normally coordinate with each other to even do a national launch. So
they were wonderful to work with, for the record.
That's okay. That's my comment. And then, but so we know you're crushing it, but at the same time, what do you see as kind of like the largest challenge facing you right now?
Largest challenge facing us right now is this dance with growth, right? This dance between distribution, manufacturing, MOQs, scaling to achieve economies of scale, to bring down your COGS, bring down your SRP. But it's like, you need the distribution or to scale into that next like volume, right? Opportunity. Or do you get the volume first to reduce your COGS and SRP to then flow into distribution more competitively? Like, it's that dance, right? What do you do like as a business? I think that is the biggest challenge that we're thinking through right now, because we got Whole Foods National. We're going through category reviews. We're talking to all the retailers. It's like, how do we piece this together in a way that is really thoughtful and intentional and responsible, for the business? That's what I'm thinking about a lot as a founder right now. Versus just like taking like 10,000 doors. If I can't really succeed immediately at 10,000 doors, or can we? Or do we take that and then find all the support to make that happen, right? It's just like that balance, then also feeling like the urgency to be there. It's just that balance of all of it, time, opportunity, but also sustainability for like the long-term vision.
It's a really smart, measured approach. I mean, you already have the national distribution with Whole Foods, which is amazing, and that's going to do tremendous things for the brand. And you're right, at this kind of transitional level, a lot of companies might run into mistakes, like, because even it's always tempting to go into like mass market, and work with a Costco or something like that. But it can often over leverage a brand where you're putting in all these things, and some of the companies have really intensive buybacks. So if your products go bad, then you got to take them back, and they can tank a company financially. So I think it's a great approach, take your time and kind of figure out what avenues are going to work for you. You've already achieved so much. So it's really exciting to kind of see where you're going to take it next. What do you see being kind of the 5-year plan, or what's new on the horizon for even the year or two?
New on the horizon, we have lots of product innovation in the pipeline. So hoping to share some new stuff next year. We are really excited to continue growing our distribution nationally. So excited to make our products more available and accessible to more folks around the country. 5-year plan. By 5 years, we'd love to be an internationally distributed brand, right? We've seen American brands like Starbucks, like Blue Bottle have presence internationally, especially in Asia. There's no reason why our brand can't be that as well. We have, cultural resonance globally. We're a made in Brooklyn brand. We understand the audience here, but we also have a strong cultural resonance with global audiences. So we'd be interested to see what that pathway looks like when we get there. I don't know if you saw, but Starbucks actually didn't have a whole lot of success in Vietnam. And there's like articles I'll send to you later about maybe why they didn't have success there. At some point, the brand is strong, but it didn't match with the flavor profiles or the palates of folks in Asia, right? Because there's not just one way to drink coffee, right? And so I thought that was very interesting. And so, 5-year plan, international brand.
I just want to say thank you so much for joining me. And I feel like this is like we got through like the surface level of a conversation. Yeah. And so I hope that we can talk another time and that we can get into some deeper stuff even, because I think what you're doing is really interesting and you're really interesting. And so I'd love to keep the conversation going and kind of see where you continue to go in your path.
I would love that. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, Jake. Thank you for all of your work in the industry. I read up on your blog and just like your commitment to industry and also your openness to expand your perspective. And thank you for sharing your platform. And we'll definitely do this again.
Excellent. Thanks again.
Thanks, Jake.
If you like what you heard, please subscribe to wherever you listen to your podcasts. A very special thanks to our guest,
Sahra Nguyen.
Thanks as always for your support and listening. Please feel free to share this with a friend and get more people to listen. Always love to hear feedback and interesting ideas. If you have a guest that you think would be perfect for our show and you'd like to hear interviewed, please feel free to hit us up at info@fnbtherapy.com. Thanks and take care.